happy, sad, angry. Chances are you've probably felt all these moods sometime over the last few days, and more likely than not, your mood has probably affected your judgment, how you act, and how you perceive the world around you. So the question is, do your moods affect your judgment? And the simple answer is yes.
So first things first, what is a mood? A mood is a temporary state of mind or feeling. They're not tied to a specific incident, but a collection of inputs. Mood is heavily influenced by our environment, by our physiology, by our thinking, and by our current emotions. Moods can last minutes, hours, and probably even days. So secondly, what is judgment? Judgment is the ability to make considered decisions or come to sensible conclusions or opinions. And we're going to talk about three types of judgments today. One of them is moral judgment, the second one is our personal perception, and the third one are actions and decisions.
When we talk about mood influencing judgment, there are two main talking points that pop up. Firstly, bias, and secondly, something known as the affect heuristic. The affect heuristic is a heuristic, a mental shortcut that allows people to make decisions and solve problems quickly and efficiently, in which current mood, happiness, sadness, anger, etc. In other words, people may make different decisions based on the same information, depending on the mood that they are in, since the mental shortcut that they make is influenced by their current mood. When it comes to mood's influence on moral choices, there have been two competing hypotheses, the moral emotion hypothesis and the moral thought hypothesis. These will be shown on the screen now. The moral thought hypothesis also encompasses the framing effect, a cognitive bias in which people react to a particular choice in different ways depending on how it is presented. We'll talk more about this later, in the context of this experiment later on. German researchers Pastora, Gleixner, Neuhauser, and Baum conducted an experiment in March 2013 to explore mood's effect on moral judgment. In the experiment, 400 participants encountered the footbridge dilemma for the first time, which is now on the screen. The experiment examined whether effective influences of positive and negative moods on moral judgment depend on the participant's active or passive decision frame in the footbridge scenario. In this experiment, participants were induced into either a positive or negative mood by listening to a certain song and writing an autobiographical memory which they connoted with a negative or positive experience. After this, participants were split into two groups, as shown on the screen, the passive frame and the active frame. The results from this experiment, shown in this diagram provided in the paper, it is shown that the participants in a positive mood were more inclined to agree with the question no matter which way it was presented. If it was asked whether it was okay to push, they were more likely to push. If it was asked whether it was okay to not push, they were more likely to not push. The opposite pattern was found in the negative mood. The results show how mood affects our moral judgment. Under the moral emotion hypothesis, a positive mood should have made them more likely to push, no matter how the question was asked. The moral thought hypothesis, on the other hand, accounts for these results quite nicely. From previous research, it has been shown that positive moods validate accessible thoughts, while negative moods invalidate these thoughts. In the experiment, if you are asked whether it was right to push, the accessible thought would be pushing the man. The positive mood would then make you feel like this was an appropriate behavior and validate this thought. If you were asked whether it was right to not push, the accessible thought would be not pushing. The positive mood would then validate not pushing, making this an acceptable behavior in your mind. Negative mood, which invalidates these thoughts, has a parallel effect but in the positive direction. Thus, this idea fits well with the results in this experiment. This experiment shows that our moral judgment can be manipulated by something as trivial as our moods and the way in which a question is proposed to us.
In our lives, we undergo social interaction on a regular basis. We meet new people, and in the interactions we have with this person, we make new judgments about their character, about the person they are, which all leave a lasting impression about that person in our minds. So the question is, how does mood affect the way we learn about judgment and remember characteristics of other people? A study by Joseph P. Forgas and Gordon Bauer explored mood effects on person perception judgments. This study looked at the effects of mood on impression formation and person memory. In this experiment, the 52 subjects were first induced into either positive or negative mood through fake feedback given to them from a bogus psychosocial test. This method of inducing mood was used because it had scientifically shown that this was a highly effective way of inducing either positive or negative moods. However, the use of deception meant careful debriefing was required. The participants were then shown sentences that showed positive and negative information about four realistic characters. The amount of time they spent reading each of the information was recorded. They were then asked to answer a questionnaire about each character, which showed to experimenters what sort of impression the participants had about each character. Finally, after 4 minutes, participants were asked to recall and write down everything they could remember about each of the characters they read about, and whose name appeared on top of each page. The results can be split into two main categories: reading time and impression formation. Firstly, recall. This looked at the influence of mood on the way subjects attended to the various details of the target people. The time taken by subjects to read about the person's stimuli was significantly affected by the mood state. As shown by the diagram, good mood subjects took longer reading positive than negative details. On average, 6,330 milliseconds versus 5,818 milliseconds. And subjects who experienced a depressed mood spent longer reading about the negative than the positive characteristics of people, which is 7,385 milliseconds versus 6,727 milliseconds. This shows that our mood affects the amount of time we spend looking at the positive and negative characteristics of a person, which biases our judgment. Secondly, impression formation. As shown by the diagram presenting the results, when in a good mood, subjects made positive judgments considerably faster than they made negative judgments, which is 3,830 milliseconds against 4,706 milliseconds. In a negative mood, negative judgments took marginally less time than they did positive judgments, which is 5,349 milliseconds against 5,434 milliseconds. Although this difference was not significant, this shows that when we are in good mood, we are faster to make positive judgments, and in a bad mood will result in a faster formation of negative judgments. This shows that our judgment is biased by mood, since our current mood dictates the amount of time we spend making a judgment. Therefore, this experiment explores mood's effect of a person's perception judgment.
2, 1.
When we talk about judgment in a sense of our decisions and actions, these pertain to more practical decisions. These include our financial decisions, such as gambling, which have proven an effective way to explore mood's effect on our decisions. One such study was conducted in March 2014 by Stephen Stanton, Crystal Rick, Scott Hertel, and Kevin Labar. The experiment explored whether mood affected our risk perception, demonstrated by the participants' willingness to gamble. The experiment also explored the framing effect, which was explained earlier. The mood induction in this experiment occurred through a visual basis, by showing the participant films that are meant to evoke positive, negative, or neutral moods. Several films that evoke the same mood, e.g. a positive mood, were shown to the participants, to mitigate the influence of an individual factor on any given video clip. Now let's talk about the method. At the beginning of each trial, the subjects were presented with a monetary endowment, let's say $75. Subjects must then choose between a certain outcome for that money, or a risky one. In the risky option, they may play a gamble to determine whether they keep all of the money or none of it. In the certain option, they maintain a portion of the original endowment, which is either presented as a gain of the initial endowment or a loss from the initial endowment. E.g., you keep $45, or in the loss frame, e.g., you lose $30. Either way, they equal to the same amount, $45, but they are presented differently. From the results in the graph shown, it is shown that all mood groups gambled more when the certain option was presented as a loss as opposed to a gain. This shows the framing effect in action, since the gain and loss frames did not change the amount, but was simply rephrasing. It can also be noticed that the negative mood group always gambled the least, irrelevant of the frame, and that the positive mood group always gambled the most. The findings that happiness increases risk-taking in this study support theories about the relationship between mood and risk perception previously. Positive moods may signal safety, leading one to disregard potential negative consequences of risk-taking. Previous experiments, as shown on the screen, have found that positive affect leads to more optimistic assessments regarding risk, and these optimistic assessments lead to more risk-taking behavior. This theory lies in accordance to the results gathered from this experiment. Therefore, this study shows that mood affects our risk perception, which in turn affect our decisions and actions. So far we showed you the effect of mood on moral judgment, person perception, and our actions and decisions. But the question you may be asking yourself is, why do I care? Simply put, this investigation holds a personal significance to each and every single one of us. We all encounter moods, and each and every day we have to make judgments. The influence that mood has upon our judgment becomes important when we realize that every decision and every thought that we have is in some way influenced or dictated by our mood. Through our investigation, it is shown that moods can affect our judgment on our financial decisions, social interactions, moral decisions, as well as a range of other decisions that we make on a daily basis.